areas, checking what are the risks that identify and manage, and what are the outcomes measured and impact assessed for the people of Jersey during this time of common strategic policy. But before we'll do the introductions, Deputy Anna Gardiner, President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee and the Chair of the panel.
Deputy Helen Miles, Vice President of Scrutiny Liaison Committee and Chair of Corporate Services.
Deputy Catherine Curtis, Chair of Children, Education and Home Affairs.
Deputy Alex Curtis, Member of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel.
Deputy Montfort Tadier, joining online, Economic International Affairs Scrutiny Panel.
Thank you. I'm Deputy Kirsten Morell, Minister for Sustainable Economic Development.
Tom Holbrook, Chief Economic Advisor.
Heath Harvey, Head of Local Economy.
Thank you. And the first question, general question. In what ways does your department contribute directly to the delivery of the 13 common strategic policy priorities?
So, I mean, there are two kind of priorities which are listed as being linked to me as a minister and therefore the department. And that is the transition to a living wage. And the other one is reducing red tape and enhancing opportunities for business, strengthening Jersey's international reputation. So they're the two kind of direct ones. But there are also other areas which come across, which are the ageing demographics of the island, cost of living, which is also in there as a theme. And we have other elements such as revitalising town, which, again, not my priority to deliver, but clearly one that I have significant interest in.
Are there any CSP priorities in your remit that are at risk of delay or non-delivery due to the budgetary or resource constraint? Are there areas that you just needed to postpone or actually say it's not now because of the budgetary and resources delay?
Yeah, I don't think so in terms of the actual CSP priorities. Transition to living wage is still going on. The money for that in terms of the £10 million a year is still there. Reducing red tape has continued. And pieces of legislation which are important to that, such as the draft liquor licensing law, they have managed to carry on as well. So that they've not been hit. So I don't... Cybersecurity is mentioned in the CSP. That's one which we've carried on with, but I think there is still a conversation over, I can't remember if it's law drafting time, I think. There's still a conversation on about getting law drafting time to bring that through. And that's because cybersecurity is mentioned in the CSP as well. So that would be the one I'd say would be most at risk.
What about the reducing red tape? Say, what initiative did you have enough funds to implement, and what some initiative that needed to be postponed?
So obviously, draft liquor licensing law is one. The public entertainments law is still ongoing, and so they're still working to plan. There's no delays in them. We've done things such as changing the tourism order. We've done that once. We're going to do that again. The fact that we did it once and took away some of the regulations there was very good. We've now identified further regulations that we'd like to remove or reduce. And so we've put in for law drafting time in that area as well. Planning to rescind the shops law. So that would be just an entire rescindment of the law. That's about working hours. That's carrying on. Amendments to the competition law are to be debated shortly in the States. So they've carried on. So I don't think there's any direct one which... there are things we've not been able to do in the way that we want to do, but not linked to the CSP in this way.
Okay, and how are your department working with other departments to deliver priorities to cut across the portfolios, for example, childcare, cost of living, upskilling?
So obviously cost of living is across government, and I chair the cost of living group, and on there we have the Minister for Social Security, Minister for Housing, Minister for Treasury and Resources, and the Chief Minister. That meets on a regular basis, minimum quarterly. And we've carried on with that work there. Obviously, in terms of the minimum wage and the living wage, that transition, that's something that we've discussed a lot with Social Security Minister. And we also discuss that within the group itself. There's a piece of work on the minimum income standards that's linked to that. Now, there was some debate as to whether that would go ahead, that piece of work or not. My understanding it still is. Yes, I just wanted to check. So, whilst I think we had to state our claims as to why it should go ahead. It is still going ahead, so those claims were listened to, which is really good. So there's a large piece, that's, you know, cost of living touches so many areas, there's a large piece of work going on there.
Upskilling, how much?
Upskilling.
How much has the work gone with SIPES? on
Yeah, so I
upskilling?
would say with SIPES, I think there's been less direct interaction between the two. Obviously, there's money in the Better Business Support Package, £1.5 million for skills development. The idea there was to give the money to so the money available to employers so they could choose what training to deliver. I would say that there has been less cross-ministerial speaking.
Okay.
Whether there's been officer
Yeah.
kind of exchange, I'm not so sure.
The
It's okay,
House,
we'll
yeah.
go a bit deeper into these areas.
Thank you.
Planning with the other two.
Oh yes, sorry, a really good point. Just planning, that's
Yeah.
a really important one. So working with the Environment Minister to deliver the planning hub and obviously the revitalisation of town. And also, so we've been attracting businesses to the high street. The Infrastructure Minister has been kind of relaying the high street, for want of a better phrase.
Infrastructure.
Public realm and infrastructure, exactly. And, really
Are you
pleased with
sitting on
what's
the
going
regeneration steering
I
group?
do sit on the regeneration steering group, yeah.
Thank you. The CSP is narrow in its scope just to the 12 core priorities that were decided by this government, and that was later expanded to 13 to include the carbon neutrality implementation. In your view, has narrowing the focus to a limited set of priorities worked well?
I think, given the 2-year kind of length of the government, I think it was a thing that had to be done, because I don't think you could have had a more extensive common strategic policy for government that was only there for 2 years. I think it's really interesting. So I subscribe to the idea that we need to keep government at the right size for Jersey. You know, we have a 20% tax take. That in itself limits the size of the government that you can have in the island. But I think that it's very easy to say government should do less. And I agree in many places that it should do less. But that's a conversation you need to have with the public, because ultimately politicians elected by the public are trying to do the work that they've heard the public want done. If, on the other hand, from an officer perspective, officers are saying, well, we're not, don't want to do that work because government will have to get bigger to do that work, then obviously you're letting down the public. And so I think there is a real discussion to be had about how much can this narrative of government do less, how much can that carry on if, in fact, what you're doing is no longer meeting the needs of the public.
So in terms of your role around the Council of Ministers table, when you're having the discussion about budget allocations to meet the priorities of CSP, how successful have you been in getting the necessary funding to meet your strategic priorities?
So from my perspective, we haven't asked for any growth. I think the main area there were plenty of areas I could have asked for growth, believe me, but I decided, the shout went out, we don't want any growth bids. So I said to our department that we'll live within that. I think the main area that may have been where I could have asked for money, which hasn't happened, would be in tourism and kind of marketing tourism. As you say, the budget for Visit Jersey has remained at approximately £5 million for the last 10 years. There's definitely been inflation in that sector, so I absolutely accept that you could have had a couple more £1 million would have helped kind of Visit Jersey with the reach that it needs to achieve in order to bring tourists to the island. I think that would have been my main area of growth. If I'd been told you can have one area of growth, I think that would have been it. But we didn't go in with that because we were told upfront, there's no growth bids. And I've got to admit, this is not just within this government. I think it was the same in the previous government that I served in as well. Health and education are winning all the arguments. I think it's really important that health and education have money, but I think you cannot limit government to just delivering health and education.
I mean, one of the things that we're finding quite curious as we've gone through the day is obviously there are 13 key strategic priorities, but not all of them are attracting funding.
That's right.
So, the fact that you've just related there that, there are no growth bids, so therefore don't ask. There were clearly growth bids for health, there were clearly growth bids for education. So I think what we're trying to get at is how that prioritisation was actually done amongst the Council of Ministers.
The answer, truthfully, is I don't know.
Okay. I'll pass you over to Deputy Tadia.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Miles. My questions always seem to come around quicker than I anticipate. So, thank you, Minister. This is just I suppose, a standalone question, an important one nonetheless, about the community risk register. So that's to do with emergency situations. So are the allocations to your department, have they been informed by the community risk register, and are you aware of the key risks relevant to your area?
Yeah, so I am aware of the key risks relevant to my area. I don't think it was such an issue in this budgetary cycle. We have in the past, so around, for instance, telecom security work. If I go back a couple of years, the reason we asked to prioritise the telecom security work was because of the risk profile, and that risk profile is the reason why we were able to prioritise and get the funding to help us do that. There's an element around that on the cyber security work as well, where the risk has led to the support for the cybersecurity law being developed further. Hopefully to the point where in this session we'll be able to take it to the States. So it has done. I don't think risk was, well, I didn't put in any growth bids, so risk wasn't a part of it, but it definitely has in the past.
What are your top risks on risk registers?
So future economic growth of Jersey not meeting the needs of government revenue or islander living standards. So effectively the ageing population and the impact of the ageing population on Jersey's economic performance.
Okay.
That's kind of number one.
It's interesting that you mentioned, because the next set of questions by Deputy Tadia, it will be around ageing population.
Very good.
Just trying to tee you up there, Deputy.
Thank you. So, Minister, what steps can the department take to ensure that the workforce has the relevant skills to keep pace with demographic shifts, but also to deal with changes in the economy, skills, etc., that are needed to make sure that experiences aren't in short supply?
Yeah, so I think this is obviously all rooted in the Future Economy Programme, and the Future Economy Programme very clearly puts a skilled workforce as one of its kind of 5 main themes. And there's no question in our mind in the economy department that we do need to have a skilled workforce going into the future. Obviously, another side of the Future Economy Programme is about the desire to increase productivity and as a result of that have a lower need for future immigration, although there is an acceptance that we will continue to need immigration. It's about minimising that need, and that's where the productivity drive comes in. I would say, and I'll perhaps hand over in a sec to the Chief Economic Advisor, but I still have concerns that the needs of the economy and the skills coming through, or the way government funds skills development, don't necessarily match. It's not an easy job because it's future gazing, and that's really important, really difficult, sorry. But ultimately, I'm not convinced yet that we really have a system in which the future needs of the economy are being fully understood by those in the skills part of government. But Tom, you may want to have a...
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think it's very difficult to get ahead and think what the future does require. So I think you come with it from a different perspective, in that you build as strong a base as you possibly can, particularly through education in the first instances. But then the skill sets are as flexible as they possibly can be as well, so that the economy can adapt as well as it can be. And part of that answer has to be through migration as well. So you've got to think through what actual skills you think you're going to import or grow yourself. And that's an important part of the discussion to have, because with the best will in the world, we're never going to be able to plug, no economy can actually, plug all the skills gaps, all the labour requirements. And the whole Western world is going through this issue at the moment.
There's clearly going to be an strong overlap between your department and the education department. So when it comes to lifelong learning, to what extent do you think it's important to make sure that we have, if it's down to a locally educated workforce as opposed to the ones we bring in to work here, how important is it that any education system is fit so to be able to re-skill people in quite short order sometimes? And do you think that, what's the link between your department and the education department?
So I think it is really important that, so more than ever, I think we're in a situation where the skills training and education need to be incredibly adaptable, precisely because the future is so unclear. There was a period probably 50 or 60 years ago when, around the time I was born, where people still had the idea of jobs for life. So it was much easier to understand what skills you would want into the future. That's completely changed. We know this now. And we do need that adaptability. That's one reason why, when it came to the Better Business Support Package and the skills side of that, I said we need to be led by employers. It's employers who know what skills they are lacking and what skills they need. Therefore, we need to empower employers to be able to pay for the skills development. I still stand by that. I don't think government is well placed, and I've been in a number of discussions over the last 3 or so years where it's almost like government is trying to say, right, we'll need this skill and this skill and this skill. And I think we're in far too fast a moving world for that now. And I don't think a kind of central view on what skills are needed is as useful as it used to be. And we need to be in a much more decentralized situation where employers who are on the front line of the economy are the ones who will know what skills they need in the immediate kind of 3 to 5 year period. And by empowering them to get the skills they need, that to me is a much better situation to be in, because I don't think government could ever adapt quickly enough otherwise.
There is one very specific piece of work we did though, which was build the labour force model. You might have heard of it as the skills barometer. It changed names as it went along. It's a year or two ago now that we did that, but that gave a lot of information about what future skills would be needed, what the labour requirements would be for the island. So we specifically inputted into that for another area to go away and help with the policy. That was a very specific piece of work.
It was, although that was one of the pieces of work which made me sit there thinking, how long will this piece of work last?
That's
Because
exactly
it could be out of date within 2 or 3 years. And that's where
I'll jump in. So is there a strategy to attract and retain working age residents then, or economically active residents, to support the ageing population?
I don't believe there is a strategy with that sort of name. The Future Economy Programme, as the overall kind of umbrella strategy for the economy, speaks to it. I don't know of a strategy underneath the Future Economy Programme which really speaks to that. In SIPES, they may have that strategy. The skills barometer that Tom was just talking about is part of that work. But I don't know of a strategy directly linked to that. Tom, do you?
There's a few things going across work, but there's no one strategy. I mean, the Future Economy Programme has that at its heart, but there's the diaspora programme as well.
Yeah.
Seeking to try and get Jersey people to move back to the island.
Yeah, that's right.
External relations are leading on. So there are lots of, I think the Future Economy Programme sets a strategy that is what we're trying to achieve. There are then lots of actions that actually do sit under that, even if they're not part of the department's work or from elsewhere.
I do, and even recently was thinking along these lines, I do question whether skills and lifelong learning should be in the education department or whether it should be more in the economy department. And I often have that debate with myself. As with anything, there are pros and cons, and you probably need a blend of the two. But I'm not convinced that skills and lifelong learning kind of solely sitting in the education side is necessarily the best place for it. That's a personal view, not a government view.
Is there a sense in which you need both? Do you probably need people with the skills?
You do need both.
Yeah, the wherewithal to be able to learn. So it's continue learning, but then somebody needs to provide the skills which are going to be anticipated.
That's right, yeah.
And I mean, are some of those skills digital skills, presumably?
Some of them will be digital skills, but there are many other skills. I mean, one thing I think that is often ignored in the government sense is soft skills. So many employers have spoken to me about a lack of soft skills, and particularly communication skills that they see in younger employees that they take on. And that unfortunately, there is also a reality around the kind of the way we discuss things in politics. If something's quite hard, we like it, it's clear, it's tangible, that's fine, we understand it. When something's soft, we struggle with it, the media struggles to understand it, people struggle to understand it, but often it's those soft things which are actually the very most important things. And I think it's why arts often loses out to science. Science is hard, arts are seen as soft, but art, but the soft side is just as important, if not more so. And so in this case, I think soft skills are something which are often overlooked and really mustn't be, because the ability to communicate, the ability to empathise, the ability to understand your fellow human beings, to adapt your behaviour accordingly is absolutely vital in the workplace.
Okay.
Can I move on? Chair, is there still time to a few more questions in this area?
I think another couple questions, can be done.
So I turned to pensions actually. So there was a proposed workplace pension scheme a few years ago, I seem to recall, under Deputy Martin at Social Security. That's been shelved, it appears. How does the decision align with the government's stated CSP commitment to prepare for the demographic change and ensure long-term economic sustainability, especially for people into older age and living longer?
So I think, I'm going to put my hands up here, Deputy Tudyer, and say I'm one of the people who's been advocating to delay that piece of work. And the reason, quite simply, was you think I first came into government as a minister in 2022, the Ukraine war, off the back of COVID and Brexit. I felt at the time that to put extra cost onto employers this was not the right time to do it. So I'm one of those very frustrating people who sits there and completely accepts that it's an important piece of work that needs to be done, and then in the same breath says, but not now. And I think that's probably the most honest assessment of my perspective on it. So I have been advocating to delay it. I think it is a piece of work that needs to be done. And it is one of those where there's no perfect time for it. But on the back of Brexit, COVID, etc., the Ukraine war, I think was the wrong time. I do think the new government will likely look at it again. Chief Economic Advisor's views could be useful on this one.
It's very clear. Deputy Adi, another question do you have on this topic?
No, I think that's all on. Well, I think I'm happy to leave it there. We can come back to any if we have time at the end.
Okay, sure. Very quick from me on this topic, because it feels like we have diaspora, we have future economy, we have barometer versus SIPES, and obviously increase of provision, lifelong learning and skills development is part of CSP.
Yes.
Have you discussed within the Council of Ministers, was it part of the how we are delivering upskilling and skills? Where's the money coming from and who is delivering it, and how we engage with the business? Because you said there are two areas and have different budget. Did you have joint discussion at the Council of Ministers on this area?
At the risk of being wrong, I don't remember having those discussions. I just caveat that with maybe my memory's failing me, but
have you had a meeting with Deputy
Ward
Ward specifically about what skills are required, what barometer works, and?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I will just.
I'll just leave it.
I'll look to either officer just to correct me in case I'm wrong.
You did mention about the Better Business Support Programme, which then has wider.
It's better business support, but not as a part of the core strategic
not the wider
policy.
thing, I don't think so.
Okay,
And
thank you.
And I think just to follow up on Deputy Gardner, it's very interesting if you look at, page 3 of the common strategic priorities, increase the provision of lifelong learning and skills development. The sustainable wellbeing bit is community wellbeing, but the island outcomes are linked to children.
Yeah.
And I think that's very telling in itself. If it's that leads you down the SIPES route, when
does.
actually it is so much broader and probably would have been better off in the business environment and the
And
economic wellbeing.
that gets to the heart of the discussion I have in my own head by myself
This
about
kind of
should it be
separation,
exactly.
yeah.
And one of the things I remember discussing this when I was with Deputy Gardner. When I was in government, Deputy Gardner, was this idea that the employers know best what skills they need, but also that, in an ideal world, we would have people in their 50s or 60s choosing to change careers. Now, they're not going to be able to look at their employers for help to change career because the employer won't want anything to do with that. So we need to find a mechanism for funding career changing. And again, if you've worked your life on a building site, as you approach your 60s, your body is getting tired, but you surely need to continue working. So people in those situations need to find other jobs, and we need to help them as a government and get the training they need to change careers.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah,
Chair, I do
Tadeu.
have one question, sorry. Is there an issue about needing to, when you need to do the training might not be the time that you need the actual skills, so is there a way which we could encourage either businesses or could it be done also centrally so that, you know, people who are in jobs are doing CPD and skills development on the job, even in general areas that can then give them transferable skills if they suddenly become redundant for whatever reason? Is there work going on in that area?
Not to my knowledge. I do know, obviously, after the financial crash in 2008, government was really successful in with the Back to Work scheme, was really successful in helping people train for new jobs, and they really were. In a lot of cases, I understand it really was people who had lost jobs in manual labour and were having to equip themselves to work in an office. And so it was an entire cultural change that came along with that. But government did do a good job back then. It was a really successful scheme, but it was discontinued at some point. I'm not sure when.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting about these skills. And of course, a lot of businesses just do their own training anyway, don't they?
Yeah.
I've got questions now about the childcare nursery funding. So, Minister, can you identify what economic outcomes might be expected from introducing 15 hours free nursery funding?
So the hope is that it will free up labour and capital in different ways. So the labour side of it is that it will enable parents to be at work. So if there's a primary caring parent, that primary caring parent will be able to spend more time, will be able to go to work should they choose to. And the other side of it is we know that childcare is an extremely expensive cost on young families, and so relieving that cost to the tune of 15 hours a week. Obviously, a family can choose to buy more. Will help them have, it will reduce their costs as a family, so that enables them to then spend elsewhere or buy other skills or whatever they wish.
So they have more money left over to spend.
Yes, that's right. And ultimately, whilst I talked about the primary caring parent, most of the time that primary caring parent is a woman. And so there is the hope that it will enable more women back into the workplace, though it is not specifically aimed at women. I think they would be likely the largest beneficiaries.
Okay. Have you engaged with employers, business groups and industry sectors to understand how childcare access affects recruitment, retention and productivity?
I haven't directly.
You've met with the IOD and talked about this.
I met with Jaya as well a while ago.
And we have had that with representative groups as opposed to direct businesses, I would suggest.
Yeah, that's really good.
Heard about
I also met with the
private
Owners
nursery
Association
meetings.
discussing that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Have you received any feedback from businesses regarding the proposed expansion of nursery care?
I mean, not from individual businesses. I have had a general sense of this is a good thing. People are pleased with it. I've also had people concerned, and I agree with this concern again, that government's created a 15-hour situation. No one works a 15-hour week job. If you want to be part-time, you're on 20 hours a week. Yeah. And so we have, I'm definitely of the view, 15 hours is better than nothing. If we could get that to 20 hours, I think that would be much more helpful than 15, because it will match more easily with the part-time working week. And I think we've seen that not just every, I think government has a habit of not quite matching with the business environment, and this is just another example of that.
Yeah, because a lot of people, I think, do like 5 mornings of 4 hours and things
Precisely,
like that, don't they?
That's exactly right. Kind of 9 till 1. That's right. 5 days a week, 9 till 1.
Okay. How is the nursery care proposal being integrated into workforce and skills planning, particularly in relation to enabling parents to return to work or upskill?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't really know on that side.
We were involved in the work from an economic point of view in terms of what the economic benefits would be. So we were aware of that, and there's no direct plan to link things in, but we were involved in discussions and the shaping of the policy.
Okay. Do you know, is there a strategy to ensure sufficient childcare workforce capacity and quality to meet?
So I think that's the discussion that the Education Minister has been having with representative groups like the Jersey Early Years Association. I spoke to the Jersey Early Years Association probably about a year ago or so. They had concerns then. My understanding is that they've been working through those concerns with the Education Minister. I don't know the conclusion of those discussions.
So you'd say that's to do with the Education
Yes,
Minister? Okay.
yeah.
And sort of on that subject around discussions with the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning, I know you already said about the strategy to attract workers to support the ageing population, that you didn't know if there was a strategy in Cyprus. And
Yes.
so also, do you know, do you have discussions with that minister about the childcare expansion and how it's working?
I haven't had many discussions, or perhaps it'd be better to say I haven't had any discussions.
Yeah.
I think.
So that
yeah.
could be a concern about. Yeah.
Could be.
Okay. I think that's my question, sir.
You,
Deputy
Can I jump in, Chair?
sure.
It's just about the purpose of the 15 hours of free childcare. Is the link between an economic driver and the free childcare automatic? Does that question make sense?
I think it would be quite automatic because there's an immediate cost saving for families and there's an immediate time saving for families. So again,
I suppose what I'm asking is that
Yeah.
will this necessarily make people go back to work or take up more hours, or
No.
you could just use the free time to go and have a coffee or read a book or do an exercise class or
so
do whatever, couldn't you?
in that sense, Deputy Tadia, you're correct. And I do ask Tom to correct me if I'm wrong, but whilst automatically a family will gain time and they will automatically gain money because the government is paying for 15 hours of childcare, they do not necessarily automatically then choose to go back to work. That is a choice that each individual parent has to make for themselves and for their family. And so it will be interesting to see how much the 15 hours do encourage, people do go back to work. We won't know until we see.
And is it a longer term strategy as well to encourage people to have more children? So if you're at the moment you're struggling about whether you've got enough time or money to do it, is it saying actually we do need to solve the conundrum of the ageing population? We do want more people to have. We need a higher birth rate. Is this both a short term and a longer term strategy?
So it may be in the minds of the people that have devised it. In my mind, it certainly is not. And I've said this around the council minister's table. I think I've said it in the States, and I certainly said it in a meeting today, which was that no government policy has ever successfully increased the birth rate anywhere in the world. And there's a really good article in The Guardian at the moment about Poland, and it now spends 8% of its revenue on child-focused policies solely in order to try to increase the birth rate. But since it started really funding increase in childcare, reducing the cost for parents, it really putting vast amounts of money into that area, the birth rate has fallen further from 1.3 children per woman to 1.1 children per woman. So,
okay. But I think there are historical examples which some argue have been effective. It's a case of whether you attribute the policy towards the consequence, I think.
maybe
But
I've
I
just
suppose
yet
what
to
I'm
find-
asking is there, in terms of the general policy, it doesn't seem that there's necessarily a consensus amongst the Council of Ministers about A, what this is for, and B, what it will produce, if it will produce the desired outcome. Is that a fair statement?
So my understanding is it's always been about trying to ensure children have the best start in life, and it's also been about principally helping women back into the workplace. But it's not just women; it's parents back into.
What
the
if the
workplace.
two are mutually exclusive? I mean, some argue that the best start in life is having a parent at home with the child for the entirety of their childhood, and therefore it's the economic factor. We can't afford to do that. Therefore, both of us need to work. So let's help them do that. Is it necessarily the best start? I suppose, is there a mixed message being sent out?
I
and a
think
mixed
that's
message in government.
I think that's down to individual parents and families to make those decisions. I think it was really interesting. I was at an event at the weekend, a kind of woodland event, and a lot of the children there were homeschooled, and they were above nursery age, but they were being homeschooled, and it was interesting. I'd never met so many, people who are homeschooled, and it showed as well that government obviously provides an education system, but individual families choose to opt out of that system for their own reasons, and I think it's the same here. You have to choose according to yourself as a family.
Sure, and very quick question, just to wrap out this area. You mentioned 20 hours, and that's kind of makes sense instead of 15. Has you raised this within the Council of Ministers? Did you have a discussion between at COM if it's 15 or 20?
Not that I remember, no.
Okay, I would like to move to, but thank you, move to the next area, cost of living wage. Very quickly, because obviously you're receiving, your department received business support at 10 million. It has been done in 2025 and going in 2026. What lessons have been learned from the implementation in 2025 support measures, and how this inform design of the business support in 2026, if it will be any changes, adjustments?
So we're not expecting many changes or adjustments. It's been a really successful scheme. The one area which, particularly given our earlier conversation, one area which hasn't performed to the extent that perhaps we would have liked is the money for skills. And so we have £1.5 million in the skills pot, and we were the £2.3 million for the productivity support element was taken very quickly by businesses. It was really successful. And because there was a lack of demand in the skills side, we were able to move £500,000 of that £1.5 million into the productivity side. So it became 2.8 instead of 2.3. I think that's probably the main area where we've seen some sort of mismatch, but I will ask Tom to say his own views, whether there's any other areas.
We said that we actually, because skills, it's so separated between skills and the employers and your department and other departments, and now back to work question, if they can provide the skills. The non-demand on this £500,000, does it because there is no demand, or because we don't have joint system and the people we are not providing? Because it's very clear from the business community that we don't have enough skills on the island. We have more demand that we can provide.
Yeah, that's correct.
So what difference can be made between your department and SIPES, for example, for 2026 to ensure that this money actually...
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that we need to talk with SIPES about and discuss, and also with employers, because again,
Yeah, for sure.
the idea is that the money would go to employers to pay for skills, so that they didn't have to use any particular training provider. They weren't, it was them. Maybe they had too much choice. I know that sounds perhaps a bit silly, but it's not. Often, if you don't direct people down a path, they don't take the path at all if they have lots of paths to choose from. There was also the issue of the trainee rate, which slowed down take-up of apprenticeships, as I understand it. And so that had an impact as well. And the reason I asked Tom is only from his kind of official perspective, whether there's a view that you have on the lack of take-up on the...
I think it is a good point. We do want to make that skills programme a bit more effective next year. We're doing the review at the moment and coming to you with that tomorrow. I think sometimes it just takes a little tweak in a programme to actually make it more successful. I think productivity has shown that the former productivity support scheme was not overly successful at all. We've tweaked things, we've learned from that, and we've improved it so that now it has had fantastic take-up in the last year. Hopefully we could do something similar with skills to encourage businesses to take up the opportunity to invest in their own labour as well. So there could be a couple of things we just want to look at in terms of flexibility, amounts, but also why businesses aren't taking it up. Some of it is they don't want the members of staff to be away from work, for instance, and can they maybe sort of incentivise that a little bit more. So we are just going to look at that from a skills point of view. It is the slight disappointment. We would have hoped that would have been greater take up, but if there isn't, we want to make sure that businesses are still investing in other parts, even if it's capital rather than labour. So we might look at the boundaries in terms of the amount of money that there is as well, which we've already done this year to maximise the opportunity.
Just very quickly, Thomas talked about an earlier productivity support scheme. I think it was about £300,000, if I remember rightly. And that ran for a couple of years and had almost no take-up whatsoever. But it was learning from that then enabled us, when the money was available for this productivity support scheme, enabled us to change and deliver.
Can you give
different
some
scheme with a
examples,
huge
like
take-up.
3 examples from different areas of the productivity support that grant was given, and what was the outcome?
Well, the outcomes are yet to be determined, because
But
they're
examples
over
for
longer
the
term.
grants for the public.
I mean, in general, they are things like businesses investing in new computer systems. So I know one organisation that's invested in a client relationship management system, for instance, which enables them to just operate much more leanly. We've also had businesses investing in actual kind of capital in terms of, I think, particularly hotels. There have been a couple which have actually invested in refurbishment, which enabled them to charge higher prices, make them more attractive, bring in more customers. I think those are the main 2 areas: your kind of capital investment versus, well, they're all capital, but versus your IT investments.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And just to build on that, we are going to do some case studies as well. So to look at actually where this has worked very, very well, that other businesses might learn from. So it's not just about money, it's about learning and cross-fertilisation. It's about the businesses that they are interacting with the funds as well, the vast majority of which has been on island. So we're growing a business support system effectively, or not growing, helping to enable a business support system that will be in place in 2 or 3 years' time, not just today. And I
What the
think that's
timescale
really
for this
crucial.
work?
No, sorry, that's part of the byproduct of the work that has been ongoing. So, for instance, if a company gets £50,000, they buy from another Jersey company. That company improves its own investment and what it's doing and how it can support businesses in the future, when perhaps maybe there isn't support there.
No, but I mean, when we can see the outcomes.
For the case studies,
Yes.
we'll start working on that towards the end of this year to encourage that for next year. At the end of the programme, we will do a more full evaluation as well. But this is about supporting it in year.
I have 2 more questions on this one very quickly. Sorry. Given the state's grant adjustment and support funding is temporary, what considerations been given to the long-term sustainability of affected business once this support ends?
Yeah, so this, I think, is, in my head, a really important question for the new government come July next year. I think there's a really strong case to say that at least some elements of this Better Business Support Package should remain in place. I think particularly the productivity side, the productivity investment side. We know that Jersey has a really low rate of business reinvestment. That's something which is holding the island back and definitely stops us increasing our productivity over time. What we've seen, and many people may argue that government shouldn't have to do this, that's correct. But I would say, in the face of the evidence that businesses don't reinvest in themselves, anything we can do to encourage that reinvestment is going to have a really big impact for the whole island and a positive impact for the whole island. So I think there's definitely place to have a discussion in a new council of ministers when they come to be setting their agenda and their common strategic policy in 2026 to really look at elements of this business support package and which bits they think should be kept or not kept.
Deputy Tadia. Mute. Unmute, please.
Has any analysis been done about why businesses in Jersey might not reinvest as much as elsewhere?
Not that I know of. It's as a kind of understanding of the environment. It was about a year ago, I think, the chief economic advisor was able to come up with those statistics. So since then, I don't think there's been much opportunity to actually analyse it, but Tom knows better more than I do.
Analysis may be the wrong word, discussions, trying to understand the theory behind it a little bit more. Maybe not for today, maybe we could have a different scrutiny
Fine, yeah,
about
absolutely.
it. We could go on for quite some time just about that.
There's one for the Economic and International Affairs panel, for sure.
And happy to come back with
Yeah.
that in more detail.
We'll save that for next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. As I have another question. There's actually 2 because of your response. First of all, how are you sure that the businesses will be able to operate profitably under living wage without ongoing support? Do we have businesses that might fold within a year or 2 despite receiving support?
I mean, there will be somebody, a business somewhere which is, not going to see out the year. Mm-hmm. There's no real way for us to know what situation a business is in before they engage in the business support package. But upon engagement, we have a close relationship through Jersey Business that helps them manage the investment and also I would hope that they take on board the ability for Jersey business to provide them with lessons, teaching, guidance that helps them become stronger businesses. That does mean passing confidential information to Jersey business, but one thing Jersey business have shown over many years now is that they are incredibly good at maintaining confidence around all the information that they receive from any business. So I'd encourage any business, whether they feel like they're in difficult times or not, to go and see Jersey business, because there's a lot they can help them with.
Important. And one question that we asked actually all ministers, because you're members of the Council of Ministers that made this decision, it's about reducing grant to the Social Security Fund. And it's retrospectively been asked 50 million for 2025, in 2026 it's 74 million, and going forward more, 50 million approximately. In total, $250 million is not going into the Social Security Fund. Some of them going because of the capital, one-off investment, but some of them are ongoing revenue spending, like earlier. Now you mentioned that actually we need to consider, or next government need to consider, to support businesses to ensure that businesses reinvest. And again, these funds coming from the Social Security Fund. Do you think that reducing grant into the Social Security Fund as ongoing mechanism is sustainable?
It is certainly in the short term. I think obviously the longer that goes on, the less sustainable it becomes. What I would say is something I've been really clear about for many years now, which is I think there is a place for the Social Security Fund to be used investing in capital projects in Jersey, capital projects where the Social Security Fund can get a return. So the buying of Union Street was a good example of that. The Social Security Fund did that, and it will get a return through a lease from government over time, which definitely means that it gets a return for islanders. I think that's a mechanism which should be used in many places. I'm entirely comfortable with the Social Security Fund or the Strategic Reserve being invested in capital projects in Jersey where the fund can receive a profitable return. I think we should use it. And if you were to do that, then, I mean, you could even do it for something like building a school or something like this, because government would then pay a lease back to the Social Security Fund. That then frees up the revenue from that year to be used on service spending. So I would readjust things, because I am not a fan of any reserves being used for revenue spending. I don't like it. I would use those funds a lot more for capital spending where there's a return. So sewers, for instance, you won't get a return, so you don't want to use the fund to pay for sewers. But where you can, you should, and that will free up revenue for revenue spending.
Thank you. And we'll move to Revitalising Town.
Thank you. One of the, I think it's priority number 11, deliver a plan to revitalise town. Is the revitalisation of Superior being factored into the broader strategy of sustainable economic development?
Yes, it's absolutely in there, and the Future Economy Programme is quite clear about the need to invest in capital as well. And for me, I'm really pleased with the revitalisation of town. I think it's something which is long overdue. I think many politicians, most likely you all as well, as islanders, you don't have to be an islander, you don't have to be a politician to recognise that over the last 20 or 30 years, Jersey hasn't invested properly or sufficiently in its kind of public realm. And so I'm a huge fan of the investments going into the public realm at the moment. And we can see it. I think we have a really good high street. I'm going to keep saying it. We have a great high street, and it's getting better all the time. That public realm is really helping with that, but we're seeing new shops moving in today. And we've got a lot to be proud of in our high street.
Thank you. Does the proposed budget include any funding or initiatives under your portfolio which are directly supportive of the revitalisation of town? I
don't think directly that I can think of. But there's no question when you're redoing Broad Street, I see that as economically beneficial from an economic development perspective. I can't think of any direct we have the Opera House. So these are capital projects outside of the scope of that. We have the Opera House, which my team, in the face of Heath and others, led on that. So we're very proud of that, and I think that helps us. We also have, via Jersey Heritage, invested in things like Elizabeth Castle, Hampton and other areas as well. In general, we're not a department which does much in the way of capital deploying capital, but we encourage capital to be deployed in areas like public realm where we know it will be of huge benefit to the economy.
I think you also fund, Minister, the likes of Genuine Jersey,
We do.
which bring vibrancy to the high street through their Christmas markets and that sort of thing. So there's a number of areas. Our growth bid from a couple of years ago around the visitor economy, and that strategy doesn't go to. A lot of it comes back to St Helier. So we did some public realm stuff around the market and new bench seats from trees that fell in the storm and what have you, principles of circular economy again, but not siloed thinking. Where can we get the best overlap possible with as many other departments of government and likewise overlapping priorities.
And our events programme is also around the market, bringing
Absolutely.
people into town.
And hopefully soon going to be out west.
Indeed.
Do you consider it part of your role to ensure that revitalisation supports small and independent businesses as well as the larger businesses?
I do, and I think, particularly when you talk about our high street, one of the things we've got to be proud of in our high street, it does have small independent businesses, locally owned, as well as large chain stores. It's a really good mix, and some of the new stores that we're seeing at the moment are locally owned stores. So I think it is important. I don't think it's something that you can easily dictate. You just got to hope that market forces enable these things to happen. But if you look at the high street today, it does have that mix, which is good.
Okay, thank you. Under the Delivering Best Outcomes for Islanders says we aim to be a government that works in an inclusive way for all islanders. Vibrant and inclusive community is one of the 10 island outcomes in the Future Jersey vision. So how do you ensure that that is reflected in your economic development policies and programmes?
From an inclusivity perspective, I think from the perspective of kind of particularly women in the workplace, I think we've been quite strong in that area. But I think there are other areas of inclusivity where perhaps we don't have such success. I mean, I've been very keen for Jersey's kind of minority national communities to be much more involved, particularly in our arts programmes and our cultural programmes. But we've struggled to engage, I would argue. I think we've had great success in some areas, and Dreaming Trees, I think, was one of the really good ones where I saw huge amounts of people who live in town in the middle of February going to Howard Davis Park and just enjoying that. And it didn't matter where they were from, who they were just able to enjoy it. Things like free entry to the Jersey Museum was very much made with the idea of people on lower incomes and possibly from non-British nations, particularly living in town, would be able to go and see the museum for free. We're yet to know whether we've succeeded in meeting those other groups of people, or whether it's kind of what's happened is just the same groups of people have visited the museum more often, because it does tend to be kind of British, fairly affluent people, I think, who tend to visit. And so it is very much in our thinking. It's not always in our success, unfortunately, but we do always think about it.
And you're taking steps to monitor that and actually evaluate the effectiveness of
No,
those
I think it's
across-
something that we don't monitor properly, actually, and we probably should.
So
Because
you-
it's an aspiration,
some
and it's
plans to
one
do
that these
Okay.
guys have heard me talk about many times, but I would say when you talk about monitoring, I don't think we do probably monitor it particularly well.
Thank you.
So briefly, Minister, as we come to the end, what we've talked about with a lot of ministers is how some of the priorities cross-cut, and ministers are often acting as champions for certain elements of their portfolio with other ministers. And one area we were interested in understanding your involvement in is in influencing where digital investment has been going within government in the context of the CSP priority about reducing red tape. And noting how the 2023 barriers to business frequently noted that interaction with government services was a key barrier. So your role in the last 12 months in trying to champion investment in that area.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's championing investment, but for instance, even I've come back to the Better Business Support Package. It's not about the money; it's about the delivery mechanism. So there, we understood, and I think we understood quite correctly, that in order to have an easy way for businesses, or it's not just businesses, it could be charities, etc., organisations, to access a Better Business Support Package, we would need a good web interface. And government probably wasn't the best place to deliver that. So we asked Jersey Business to do so. and they did, and they succeeded, and they've done it in a way which is only 3% kind of admin cost for the whole package, and it's been really successful. 95% of people are using that system really well and happily. So it can be done. Where, you know, in terms of actual interaction via the government website, I still think there's a lot that is to be desired in that area. There's someone who filled in their tax form relatively recently, as many islanders know. I still think, you know, and I'm not trying to criticise anyone who's there at the moment, because this is a long-standing issue for government. I think government still has a very long way to go before it is properly digitally enabled. And I think I said it publicly as well. You know, artificial intelligence, as we know it today, the government should be using that for a lot of its admin tasks, for a lot of its research tasks. Government should be using these tools, but I don't believe it is at the moment.
One thing, you know, I'd be quite interested to understand is digital services, who deliver a lot of the work, is under the Chief Minister.
Yeah.
And the budgets are significant. This year, 20.6 million in capital was allocated to IT. Next year in the budget, it's 25.2 million. How do you work with those ministers or ministers who've commissioned work to say the business community need this from how government works to deliver against the CSP? Or is that something you're looking to work more on with ministers?
I think it would be the latter. If you want to put it diplomatically, I don't think there have been many discussions. I mean, I always worry about government digital expenditure, because I think most of the panel would agree with me on this. We have seen many millions of pounds wasted over the years on the government's digital initiatives. And so at the moment, is it being spent appropriately? I genuinely don't know.
Do you have joint discussion on the all IT spending across the government? Because we know this is going to the health, and this is going to the infrastructure, and this is going to this.
Not that I'm aware of. If there is a joint discussion, it's one that I'm
No,
not
you
invited
highlighted,
to.
okay, this is the whole budget, how
Yeah,
we.
no, I mean, genuinely, I don't. Not that I know of. Tom, have you seen that at the officer level?
Again, to Mark, would work quite closely with Jason. So our head of digital in the economy department does work closely with the chief digital officer chief technology officer for government, about both leading the way in government, or not leading the way, in getting the government into a position where it needs to. And I think there have been significant gains recently, but how that might operate back out into the economy. So Mark is, our head of digital, is always doing that and trying to ensure that that can be improved more.
Was Deputy Talia coming in?
I've got a new area, so I don't know how far we are off the end, Chair. But
Could I then ask one more?
We have another, we've been allowed another 10 minutes, so.
Okay, save my question for.
So just a minute, Deputy Curtis will ask, couple more, we'll come to your area.
Touching back to where Deputy Miles said that, you know, this is a reduced set of priorities compared to perhaps previously. Do areas where clearly ministers have separate remits but kind of shared interest, is it clear that there needs to be more work as to how cross-ministerial and cross-department working has to improve to actually deliver against some of these, like IT and digital, where there's clear large amounts of expenditure and there's clear outcomes that other ministers want? And if so, what's stopping that work happening?
If we're talking kind of internal government,
Yeah.
So this is just my views after having been in and around government for the last 7 years. And so it's not criticising any one person or any one department. It's just the way it is. I think government struggles with understanding the transformation it needs to make internally in order to deliver the services in the way that islanders expect them to do. I think islanders' expectations, you can pretty much assume, are led by private businesses that they interact with outside. So whether it's online shopping or whether it's any other part of we interact, you know, whether it's my email, you know, via the many free email service providers or you know, workflow systems that you can get almost for free. The technological world is setting a standard which government struggles to keep up with. But that standard that's being set is the one that Jersey consumers and Jersey Islanders now come to expect. And government is kind of down here in being able to deliver that. It's slow to understand the change and it's slow to deliver the change. I think that's been the case for a decade or so at least now. And it will, I think, probably continue to be that way until we And the thing is, this is an area I don't have answers for. So I can point to the problems, but I don't have answers. It's one that I struggle to understand how government's going to break out of this cycle of not getting it right digitally. And we have spent tens of millions of pounds not getting it right so far.
Hundreds. Yep. Thank you. Deputy Tadia?
Thank you, Chair. It goes back to something that was asked at the beginning, and it relates to what kind of budget this is. And clearly there have been choices about where growth bids have been accepted and where monies have been allocated. And I feel, Minister, at the beginning you were starting to tell us about how not investing more in Visit Jersey could be a short-sighted omission. Can you give us any more clarity on that?
No, I mean, yes, and I will, I will work to see if there is a way of achieving more spend for Visit Jersey. It is just a case of the inflation. Visit Jersey's budget hasn't changed until effectively this year, when through the Better Business Support Package we were able to provide it with £2 million more. I think it needs that to be on a more, sure footing into the future. Because quite simply, £5 million 10 years ago is worth a lot more than £5 million now, and it bought you a lot more advertising and marketing than it does now. So this is the first uplift it's had in 10 years at least. And I just think that needs to be on a much surer footing going forward. So, because at the moment, after next year, they're going to be back to the £5 million again.
I mean, is there a risk in the sense that this is a short-sighted budget? Is it because whilst it's fine to spend money in areas that we need it in public services, but if we don't invest in the economy in the medium term, that actually we need those receipts in the future to be coming in to be able to spend. Is that so? I think we could talk about things like event-led tourism. We can talk about the fact that triathlons, even park runs in Jersey, are really useful for bringing in tourists. The air display, Battle of Flowers,
The marathon.
These are all things which bring people to the island to spend money, and if these are not invested in and not kept up, is there a risk that we just won't see the tax returns in the future?
So that's precisely what I've been saying for the past 3 years. It's what the Future Economy Programme points to, and has big neon sign around it. It's basically saying if you don't invest in the economy, you will not be able to afford the health costs of the future. And it is, and will continue to be my concern, that we are providing lots more money for health, and we are not shoring that up with significant investment in the economy, because Jersey's economy, on one hand, particularly on the financial services side, yes, can be seen as a world leader, but that's been that kind of leading part has potentially been at the expense of other parts of the economy, which in other areas have fallen behind where they need to be. And we need to help them, whether we like it or not. We need those businesses to invest in themselves, and we need them to become highly technologically dependent businesses as well, so that they can be as productive as they potentially can be. I do worry about the lack of investment in the economy. It doesn't mean that Jersey needs to have a kind of dictatorial economic policy. I'm very much of the view that government needs to provide the platforms, the level playing fields, and then if it provides money, it needs, as we have done with the Better Business Support Package, it's the business or organisation owners who decide how that money is best spent and make the case to government or Jersey business, as the case may be. But if we just continue to put money into health and education as well, and only health and education, then the island as a whole won't be able to afford that in a few years' time. It needs a larger economy to be able to put more money into health and education. You need a larger economy. It's that simple.
Okay. Any more questions from the panel? Thank you very much,
Thank
Minister,
you.
for your time and for your officer's time, and public hearing